It's Rich and Gary, and we're still talking baseball. And Rich, we're in quarantine day. I don't even know anymore. I lost count. How are you this week?
Not bad, Gary. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there, Rich. You know, what else can you do? Not much to accomplish, but just trying to do some stuff, keep up to date what's going on, do a little podcasting, get a couple of interviews, do them. That's about it. What else can you do?
Yeah, thank goodness for our hobby with blogging and podcasting here. We had about a half hour tune up before we did this podcast, and we always press the envelope. We try to bring us our product the best to the listeners, and we hope they appreciate it.
And you may not always see it or hear it because sometimes we have to abandon it, but we do try to do some different things. And we were playing with some video and audio stuff today, and it just didn't seem to work out. But I do like the background you created there for yourself.
Yeah, for the video version, I figured, let me give our listeners that are watching on YouTube over at MLB Baseball Talk Radio show a treat. So I figured, let me move my studio from my kitchen for my normal view of the refrigerator and the back counter, and put something up a little bit nicer for this. But yeah, time has afforded us to go into our hobbies. And I gotta say, I've been listening to a couple professional, I use that in air quotes, podcasts by some of the journalists and people in the business. And I got to tell you, I think our show sounds so much more professional than some of these podcasts. It's amazing. I mean, the other night I'm listening to the show and I'm like, I can barely hear this guy. He sounds like he's on the kitchen floor, like 12 feet away from.
Well, it's funny that you mention that because I noticed I'm watching the news, and of course now when they do a lot of interviews, and a lot of these shows on the news channels, they do tons of interviews, and they've got everybody coming in by Skype or whatever. And I noticed the same thing. I said, man, their sound is horrible. You'd think they, hook a microphone up to your computer, but you got these echoes and all this other stuff. And I said, man, it's not that much, just stick a microphone in and even a lavalier or something,
Yeah. There's a definite increase in quality. It goes from night to day. So, like you said, you hear some of these professionals, and you got to give it to the sound people that are back at the studios, the professionalism of those people. And our podcast, we've been doing it for years, so we've gradually made it better over the years,
right?
Because we wanted to. And hey, it's April 15th, normally tax day out there.
Right.
And I got a little deposit in the bank today. I got a nice little notification in the morning. I got a lot more money that I can spend on some of this podcasting.
Well, if you need any help.
I got the stimulus.
Oh, did you?
I don't want to discourage our listeners from please checking out our Patreon site, or coming over to our anchor.fm/baseball talk radio show site, where you could also donate as well. But yeah, it was nice to get that stimulus finally. Heard about it so much. A lot of rumors going around that it's taxed. You're going to have to pay it back. All false. Just wanted to let our listeners know. It's an emergency payment, no tax, and glad to get it.
And I'm sure that you've got some bills that it is already aiming for.
Sure. Yeah, the bills keep coming in. But hey, how about it being Jackie Robinson Day? We're going to start off with great news on the podcast today, because we're going to...
And then it'll go downhill.
And yeah, after about 15 minutes or so, we're going to take that roller coaster ride.
Yeah, Jackie Robinson Day, and of course, the most confusing day in baseball for me because everybody usually wears number 42, so
Yeah.
you can't tell who anybody is if you don't know their faces. But any idea what they're going to do this year? Being that there's no season, I guess they'll have to do something once the season starts.
In reference to Jackie Robinson Day,
Yeah, I would think so. No.
I don't think so. I think this is the designated day for it. Got an email from MLB, the celebration all day on MLB Network, from basically the time we're doing this podcast in the morning, right on through the afternoon and evening. They've got plenty of plans laid out for that, and plenty of programming and things all centered around it. I really don't think they're going to revisit it if a season starts. So we should enjoy it for today, I believe.
So we're not gonna. I'm just playing with some lighting here, so we're still playing with stuff as we go along.
We're still adjusting and
Still trying to figure this thing out. Oh, it should be an interesting thing. Then I saw a lot of articles going on today about Jackie Robinson Day, and it's really kind of a shame because I know the players look forward to it, and it's a great honor of the day. I can remember one of the first ones that they did. I was at Shea Stadium. That's how long ago that was, and Rachel Robinson was there throwing out the first pitch, and it was quite an honor to see her there and do that and everything. And she was right below me. In fact, I think Bill Clinton was there too, but that wasn't that big of an honor. But
interesting. Yes, as you said, 73 years ago, Jackie Robinson breaking the color barrier. And I really didn't know he was the first African American to play Major League Baseball. I find that pretty interesting. But he did break the color barrier. And I've been watching a lot of baseball, as most of us have been during this shutdown period. And a lot of the old Negro League players, were quick to say, hey, it's also us too, like
yeah,
thank us a little bit.
yeah, yeah. So many great players that never played that played in those Negro leagues, and there's not an argument. He was the first official player, but they had snuck back in the 20s, and they snuck guys in, and they said they were Cuban or Latino of some sort, and so there was another. I can't think of the gentleman's name, but he was back in the teens and the 20s. I think that actually was the first, if you want to say that. But Jackie was the one that really broke the barrier and was the first official, African American player, and really took a lot of use. If you watch that movie 42, or if you read anything by Pee Wee Reese, and he talks about those times, and Gil Hodges was a good friend of his as well. Um, it was a rough time. I mean, now the politically correct crowd would really be up in arms, but
I don't
he
know
had it
about
rough.
that. I
And
don't know about that. From being at Yankee
yeah,
Stadium when I was younger,
well,
took my son up there and his friend, and I'll never forget it. My son was a big Ken Griffey Jr. fan, and I swear the comments coming out of the crowd, it couldn't have been much worse that day compared to Jackie Robinson's day. I'm sorry. It was just
well,
terrible.
well,
Terrible.
I
And I
think
don't care what color you are. It was terrible.
the difference is it was all around. I mean, it was from the players when he played,
Yeah.
and it was on the field, and you know, it still goes on in the stands, but whether or not they even hear it anymore, who knows? But you know, I I never cared. I mean, if a guy was if I thought a guy was lousy, I didn't care what he was. I still call him a bum. You're a
Yeah.
bum.
Yeah, and I saw a little bit of the highlights of like the Brooklyn Dodgers and um, Jackie Robinson's playing during that time against the Yankees, and it was a magical time for baseball. The shot that was heard around the world that
Yeah, yeah,
ended the game and ended the Dodgers' chance there. But yeah, I hadn't really dove into that too much
yeah,
prior.
yeah.
I was aware of it and I knew little bits and pieces about it, but I didn't want to take the time to sit down and study it, so to speak. But I've had plenty of time, as most of us had during this shutdown here for the COVID. You have almost no choice to keep yourself occupied.
Yeah, I probably told this story before, but when I was a kid, my parents joined one of those book clubs, and they allowed me to get one or two books or something in the initial offering, and I picked out this baseball book, and it ended. I think it ended in 1959 or 1960. This was in the 60s, so it was pretty up to date at that time. And that's really where I got interested in the history of the game and stuff. And it had a lot of these old pictures, like, and then it had a picture of having the Doubledays ball and everything like this. And I remember we went to the Hall of Fame, and I said, "Oh, I remember that. That was in the book, and that was in the book, and this glove was in the book." Well, the first time I watched the Ken Burns baseball thing, he's showing these pictures, and I'm saying, I recognize those pictures. And sure enough, half of the pictures that he had of the early days, I'm talking about the early 1900s, the 1890s, that sort of thing. A lot of those pictures were in that book. So that I said, boy, that book was a good basis then, because you could see how in depth that book really was. And I was just like 9, 10 years old or something, but
Yeah.
I used to go through that book. I loved that book. And then I had another book that I picked up called Big Time Baseball that, believe it or not, I still have. It's in the studio, but I hung on to that book, and that had a lot of the old stories. Bonehead Merkel and uh, um, oh I can't think of the double play combination. Eva's the chance. What's the first guy's name? Uh,
It'll come to you
yeah, it'll
during
come
the
to
show.
me. But anyway, it had a lot of the old stories, and that went up to 19. I think it ended with Mazeroski's. They did some World Series stories, and ended with Mazeroski hitting the home run. That was the last blip in the book. And what was interesting, and I remember, it's funny how you remember it. They had pictures of the stars of today, and it was Harmon Killebrew was in there looking so young, but he was in a Washington Senators uniform. That was
Cool.
before they moved to Minnesota, so it was just an interesting thing, and I'll have to bring that book out one of these days. But the history is great. I love watching those old films. I love watching the Babe run around the bases. I just wish they had more of that, and more games. The whole game.
More
That
complete
yeah.
style game.
I would have loved to see more of Garrick and of Ruth and those guys. We can see Ted Williams, and even there's not a lot of full games that you see.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, those guys, the 20s and the 50s, especially in New York, was really, the 50s was the golden era of baseball in New York City,
Yeah.
between the Giants and the Dodgers and the Yankees. Um, and I mean, there's another great book, if anybody ever wants to read it, is The Boys of Summer, about the Brooklyn Dodgers. Terrific book. And I think there's a documentary out somewhere. Maybe you can look at Netflix or Hulu or something. They may have it. That was terrific too, about that. and yeah, it's just there's so much of a rich history with baseball. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, as you said, the 50s were a magical decade, as it were, even in the U.S. with the cars. The
Hmm.
car designs were awesome. Everything just seemed to be blossoming after World War II. Um, Things taking off, developments constantly. And yeah, it was a magical time.
Yeah.
Sure, baseball, looking back at it and seeing some of those games, the shot heard around the world. Years ago, I subscribed to one of the sports card magazine collector type publications, and they sent me a signed photo from this famous event. They had the guy signed a lot of them, I guess.
Bobby
Uh,
Thompson.
Bobby Thompson, and I
Yeah.
have it stashed away somewhere still, and goes down the history. It's just part of the lore of baseball.
Well, here's the funny thing, and I didn't find this out until after he passed away. My wife's has a friend, because Bobby Thompson lived in Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
My wife has a friend, and Bobby Thompson was his uncle.
Oh,
But he
okay.
didn't know him that well because he was a little older than um, he was older when he became an uncle. His parents had him late in life, but there you go. But I didn't find that out until afterwards, or else I would have had him on some show.
Yeah, of course. You'd have had an in.
Yeah, yeah. That would have been a real coup having Bobby Thompson on, but uh, even that interesting stories about that. I mean, there are like I don't know how many variations of the call because it was one of the first games they broadcast. So like every network or something had a crew there, and then there was a radio crew, and of course we all remember the famous call is the Russ Hodges, the Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant. But we digress, and there was some sad news this week in baseball as well. If I may, I'll start it off. I know we've got a couple of stories, and it's a shame, but it is news. It is about baseball, and Hank Steinbrenner, the brother of Hal Steinbrenner, who's really the managing partner and running the Yankees, passed away this past week. Non-COVID related, by the way. They made a point of that. They didn't really say. I think he had an illness he's been battling for quite some time. He passed away at the age of 63, as did Jim Fry. Remember Jim Fry, the manager of the Kansas City Royals and the
Cubs.
Cubbies and
Yeah.
other teams. He passed away at the age of 88. He was the vice chairman of the Somerset Patriots, an independent baseball team that is very successful, plays in the Atlantic League of Professional Baseball. He died Sunday, I believe. They announced it on Tuesday. So our condolences go out to the families on that. And I think you've got one too, Rich, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit about the Steinbrenner passing.
Mm-hmm.
63 years old, which
Very young.
isn't that old at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was at the Yankees facility for the first time down in Tampa, and I saw a picture of Mr. Steinbrenner there, and I'm not so sure. There seemed to be a couple people walking around that looked like him, so I don't know if maybe I happened to see him when I was down there. I'm not sure, but there was a couple executives that sort of walked into there at one point. But what a shame, he lived in Clearwater, which is right across the bridge from Tampa, and just gives you a little sense of how fragile life can be,
Yeah. Yeah.
how you need to take care of yourself and all. But yeah, the next story is one that I just found this morning. 21-year-old college player. We've been hearing about a lot of older people passing away from this coronavirus, but it certainly has no age limitations on who it's taking. But this appeared in People magazine. 21-year-old Cody Leister developed coronavirus symptoms last month in March. He was a young college baseball player and had no other apparent health um, conditions, according to his family. He was hospitalized within days, put on a ventilator, unable to say goodbye to his family as he laid unconscious before taking his last breath on April 8th. And currently, he's now the youngest person to die in Colorado of the virus. So, another sad story there. And there's so many sad stories. These people, the policemen, firemen, bus drivers, transportation people, people in
Yeah.
the healthcare industry. It's really it's overwhelming.
Well, it's this, this silent killer, as they say, and really has snuck up on us and really smacked us down. But we'll thank goodness that it's not as bad as the early numbers predicted. Of course, one is bad,
Yeah,
but they were predicting possibly millions, and um, it's a tough thing, and we were all dealing with it in our own way. And
and I hate to say it, like I believe most of it has been from us self quarantining, staying at home,
yeah,
the prevention of this, because there's just, when you look at the health, the old age homes, the certain places like that, they're tearing through them. Most of the people have it, and
mhm,
a lot of those people don't go outside. So how did they get it? Somebody brought it in there and
like
spread it,
this,
one of these super spreaders,
yeah,
maybe not even knowing they have it. And the elderly, it's completely wiping them out. But it's not specifically geared towards the elderly either. But they're just like sitting ducks, so to speak, of not being able to fend off this disease, this virus, and it's a real shame. Like a lot of people have been talking about, well, they're older people, yada yada yada. They're people, and
yeah. And the only problem is if like you say, if you're in a nursing home like that, you usually there's some kind of pre-existing condition, and that even makes you even more vulnerable to a disease like this. And it's just it's just a killer that got loose, and
it's true. It's just
and really, when you think about it, it is quite amazing how it shut down everything. Shut down the economy of a country is really incredible, and it's frightening too, because I was thinking the other day, what happens if the our other enemies that hate this country, and you think, oh, see this biological. I always used to kid. I always used to say, I'm going to eat junk food and crap, because when the biological warfare comes, I'm going to be all right, because there's going to be so much crap in my body that I can fight off
you're going to
anything.
fend off anything.
Yeah, and and here you go. Here you go. Now we this is almost like, they say it was an accident. I don't quite believe it, but I'm not going to get into that here. Uh, um, is it a form of biological warfare? Well, even if it wasn't intentional, we see that we're not really prepared for anything such as that.
Yeah, we
Nor are
were
our
under.
bodies, and you have to wonder if all these health food people are, are their immune systems strong enough to uptake this, or is it the people that are hitting McDonald's all the time?
Yeah, and I think you said it right. We weren't prepared for it. Nobody understood the scale of such a pandemic could reach, closing down businesses. I think I just read Best Buy laid off 51,000 employees across the country now, and a lot of other millions have been laid off already. So, yeah, it's struck us economically, socially. It really I don't think it brought us to our knees yet, and I don't think we're any less of a country because of it, but certainly tested us. And baseball, getting back to our baseball here, Governor Ducey over in Arizona has confirmed that MLB commissioner has held talks with him about restarting the league at some point in Arizona. Since we did our podcast, there's been another realignment type of discussion thrown out there as well, uh, taking place in both Florida and Arizona. Same thing with no fans. I'm not a big fan of that realignment just for this year type of deal.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I guess I'm greedy though. I want to see baseball, so I'll take anything. They were talking also about putting in the DH for the year. I'm a little nervous about that. I understand why they might want to do it for a year, but a lot of times when you put something in like that, it never comes back out. Um, I could see doing it. I had a guest on for Mets Musings that I did an interview yesterday for the next edition coming out either tonight or tomorrow. But anyway, and we were discussing I should say not disgusting discussing the logistics of doing it, and the Arizona thing. It's just going to be so huge. People don't realize that you need every team, and then you need they're going to expand the rosters probably to 30, 35. He thought they might even expand to 40 people because they don't want to hurt anybody. Somebody's calling me here.
That's a
um
good ringer there. The Mets
yeah,
ringer.
thank you.
Nice.
And but the logistics, and if they want to keep these guys in a bubble, um it's just going to be, it's just going to be immense. If you've got 30 guys on a team, that's 60. And then you got traveling secretaries, and you've got clubhouse guys, and you've got the on field, the grounds crew. And then you got to have security there. You got security. Um,
But they're
uh,
good at doing this. The MLB is,
yeah, but
is pretty good at setting these things up. But um, when is the question? And the governor down there in Arizona says he has had talks with Rob Manfred about proposals with all 30 teams playing there. He said, quote, "We have the facilities that are here. We have the hotel space that is here. We want to make sure the metrics and the data are proper before we're able to go forward." Of
right.
course, but logistically, I think they can pull it off. When you think of 30 teams traveling across the country for a better part of 7 months a year, they're pretty good at working logistics out, I believe.
But that's in an open society. We're not so open now with the all the restrictions, and they want to try to quarantine these guys. And I think so they don't get out to the public, or the public doesn't get to them. Apparently, I don't know what the reasoning is. Um, and that's where the real logistics problem. How are they going to keep these guys in a bubble? And then it involves all these other people. So do you keep all these groundskeepers away from their families for months? Do you keep the players away? They're already rebelling against. They don't like that idea. Um, I don't know if it's
Some of them
feasible.
do, some of them don't.
Yeah,
Uh,
some of them do, some of them don't. I don't know if it's feasible. That's why I think maybe the Florida and the Arizona is more feasible, because they were talking about playing 3 games at the I still call it the Bob, the Arizona Stadium. I don't know what they call it now because it's a dome stadium. But just think of the logistics of that. I mean, are they going to sanitize the locker room between each game? It's 2 locker rooms, and I don't know. I just think I think if Florida and Arizona, it makes more sense to me to take the realignment and do it that way.
But it doesn't really change anything as far as quarantining
Well, it
players.
spreads it out
It
more.
splits it up between Florida and
Yeah,
Arizona. But I don't I don't buy the realignment part of it. It's just, I do want baseball, but I don't want it to change so dramatically
I
that
get it. I get it. Because you want to see the Mets play the Phillies and the
exactly.
Nationals and
Exactly. Another season of playing the Yankees and, for the Phillies and the Baltimore Orioles and people like that.
right,
That doesn't
right.
excite me too much. But yeah, as you said, baseball in any form would be nice. And we're still a far way away from that. We're doing the podcast here April 15th, quarantining probably 3.5 weeks now
Yeah. Oh, you froze on me.
before.
Oh, there you go. You're back.
Before anything like this would happen. So
And then they'd have to. I mean, they need at least 2, 3, 4 weeks of training to get back or to get to some semblance because they don't want to put these guys out there. Especially the pitchers without. I think we're going to see a lot of 4 inning starters in the beginning to get loose and at this point, I'd be okay with that because I understand it. They're not ready, and you don't want to rush them and God forbid hurt somebody. I wonder if they would change something if a starter is dominating through 4 innings, he gets the win. Instead of the going 5 or whatever, just to and if they make 7 inning games, which is another thing they were talking about for double headers. I know they do that in the minors, so I mean I'm accustomed to that, but I don't know. Well, I just think we're so starved for something that whatever they come up with we'll accept and enjoy because we just want to see it.
yeah, that's true. And speaking of seeing things, have you checked out any of the Players League in reference to the MLB The Show going on mainly at different websites online? The players, one from each team, have been playing one another
Right.
in the baseball video game world. Have you checked any of that out?
I have not, but the other night I did SNY.com here in New York, the Met station, but it's on their website. They play every game of the season, and they're simulating it on MLB the show. And I actually was sitting there watching it, and I said to my wife, I said, "Look how desperate I am. I'm actually watching somebody playing a video game or however they do that."
Mm-hmm.
They run it the games and I'm watching this game here and it's not even real, but I have
Yeah.
not watched the players playing it yet. No.
Yeah, I've streamed a few of the games on my website at fightingphillies.com for the Phillies player who is Reese Hoskins. So it's mildly interesting. Keeps
You
your
actually
interest.
see the player playing it or is it just the game? What are you
You
seeing?
Well, on your player's channel, if they're on a site called twitch.tv,
Uh-huh.
it's generally the player and then in a small screen and then the game in a larger screen.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, you're watching the game while he's commentating on it. Sometimes they'll get together on the first night. It was sort of like a 3-ring circus. It was you had an announcer from MLB Network on with the two players, all three, and then they were trying to play a video game. So he's asking them a question about what do you think about this player, and then meanwhile the guy's trying to play the game.
Play the
It's
game.
just it didn't work too well, but he's like, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Like, what'd you say? I'm trying to play this video game. And because they're taking it serious, they're only 3-inning games.
Oh,
So
that's it. Okay.
so a lot of the times they're going extra innings, and it's pretty interesting to hear just some of the commentary coming from a player, things you normally wouldn't hear them say.
Mm-hmm.
Reese Hoskins, for example. Kept saying, I got to get better at this. I got to, represent better. And he was getting, hit around, so to speak. And, they have to bring in relievers, and there's a little game strategy involved in it.
Right.
So it's
Right.
getting to know the player a little more. There was Joey Gallo. He's 8-0 so far. He's
Wow.
undefeated. He's the best video game player, and he was sort of like, always a gamer. So he
Yeah.
might
Yeah.
have an edge up on a lot of these guys.
Well, there you go. See, they should have
So,
had the managers of each team playing, and then
yeah,
counted that towards the regular season.
that could that could be something they might go to. This was on the fly. I thought it was pretty nice, especially for I want to call them the younger crowd that
Yeah.
are into
Yeah.
that video game world, so to speak, and not that we wouldn't be, but you know. And then there's also the simulations. I've been following um, a thing called Out of the Park Baseball 21 on baseballreference.com. And it's been a daily update around 12 noon of all the Major League Baseball teams for that day. And it's a simulated series that they're running on the game. So it'll show you each day right after 12 noon what your players and your team did. That's been interesting as well.
Our teams haven't been doing good though.
Yeah, the Phillies, I think, are 4-14 or something last time I checked on the simulation. But it's just something to read. You read the box score, so and so did this, so and so did that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like it keeps yourself interested in things you used to do when we had baseball and things to watch. So I'll take just about anything at this point.
Yeah, we're going back in time, right? Stratomatic, they must be doing something as well.
Yeah, there's all these online. I'm very close to getting out of the park baseball because it's more so for either a PC or a Mac. It's sort of PC based rather than the MLB The Show, which is one of the console based games.
But is it a game per se, or is it like a Stratomatic thing, or
The Out of the Park Baseball 21 seems to be more to me stat based and less video game based, even though that's part of it. Um, Whereas the MLB The Show is more lifelike players
yeah,
playing,
I know
batting, and
it.
hitting.
It's incredible. I mean, I'm watching this video, and you can tell it's a game, obviously. But as you start to watch it, you start to get into it, and you kind of forget. It's funny because I flipped on something the other day. I guess it was YouTube, and I not, you can tell the difference. But for a moment, I thought, am I watching a simulation game, a video game, or am I watching a real game? Then I realized it was a game from last year that the Mets had won. But it's incredible when you go back to the days of the stick figures and the early video games and stuff, and how they look now is incredible.
Yeah, they've smoothed everything out, and you still hear the purists, the gamers, say, "Oh, you still see a little blocking in the players and things like that." Well,
Oh,
go back to our day,
yeah.
and it was, as you said, stick figures. Just
Yeah.
about. This is phenomenal.
Yeah, this is
Um,
unbelievable.
I'm close to wanting to get a game console
Yeah,
too.
me too.
I
There
went,
goes that stimulus check.
yeah, yeah. I got other things I went to stimulus.
Gotta help the
Microphone,
economy.
lights. Come on, we gotta more money to waste, but yeah, we got to get the economy back on the road. One little more story about this COVID, and then we'll drop it for this show. Major League Baseball stepping up for a massive COVID-19 antibodies study. Over 10,000 employees of 27 teams are going to participate in a study that is sponsored by, let's see what the story says here, Stanford University, USC, and the Sports Medicine Research and Testing Laboratory. It's going to be a small test which will detect the prevalence of what they call IgM, an antibody produced relatively early in those who have been infected with COVID-19, and Ig and capital G, a second signal that lasts after the infection. A positive test confirms exposure to the disease, even among the asymptomatic. So I guess MLB trying to find some people that are resistant maybe to this right now, and 10,000 people going to partake in that study.
And it's not just players. By the way, it's personnel that work for MLB and whatnot, and it's going to be a big important study. So it'll be interesting to see how that all comes out.
Yeah, and that was part of that, as you talked about last show, which I hadn't heard too much about, the herd immunity, quote unquote, determine a course of action on the pandemic. So interesting stuff coming up in the medical world, and we'll see.
And, Rich, one more. And, we just can't have a good story this week unless you got one in your bag of tricks, because this next story is about the former Texas Rangers star. Remember Josh Hamilton?
Yes.
Former 2010 American League MVP. He was recently indicted on a felony charge for injury to a minor, per reports. According to the story, the 38-year-old was indicted by a Tarrant County grand jury for his incident in September of 2019. That incident included accusations of hitting and scratching his oldest of 3 children. Per police report, there goes the home phone now. Hamilton told his daughter to tell a judge what a terrible dad I am so that she wouldn't have to go to his house again. According to the warrant, Hamilton threw a full water bottle at his daughter's chest. Also included in that was a report that Hamilton took a chair out from underneath his daughter. What followed was Hamilton allegedly taking his daughter to a room, pinning her on a bed, and hitting her repeatedly on the back of her legs. Hamilton's ex-wife, Katie, has since filed a temporary restraining order on her doctor's behalf. And this guy, I mean, I don't know what the deal is, how true any of this is, but boy, he just can't get it right. He's just a mess. If you remember his story with the drugs, and they had people following him, and they had babysitters with him to keep him away from the drugs, and apparently he still can't get his life straight.
Yep, 38 years old, remains free on a $30,000 bond after he turned himself into authorities on October 30th. So it goes back a little bit on this just surfacing in the news, and it's a shame. It's something that you hate to hear about and read about. Don't know the circumstances over it, but still it's hard to listen to sometimes.
Yeah, he's got a lot of demons, and he just can't get it right.
Yeah, well, we'll keep a prayer out for him that everything works out, and somehow the bridges are mended if possible. That sort of thing. Hey, it was Pete Rose's 79th birthday yesterday.
Wow.
That was a little ray of sunshine that came through yesterday in the news.
I don't know. That's a little depressing.
I thought he was older, to be honest with you. I mean,
did you?
He was 42 when he was playing for the Phillies. That was 40 years ago. Yeah, he was 40 years old playing with the
Wow.
Phillies when he won the. I think he was 39 or 40, or maybe even 41 when he won the World Series with the Phillies in 1980. So
I'm always kind of in shock though when I hear some of these ages of these players and guys that you worshipped and watched played and wow, 79. That's a big number.
yes, it
That's a
is,
big
and
number. But God bless him. He still looks like he's going strong. You don't hear any health problems. Come on, let's put him in the Hall of Fame and end this thing now and let him back in the game, especially after the whole cheating scandal and everything like this. He admitted it now in his book, so let him do a big mea culpa once more to baseball, and just let him apologize one more time out in front of everybody, and you know. and bring him back into the fold. He don't have to work and get the game. He's 79. Man,
yeah,
just let him in so he can get into the Hall of Fame, and they're gonna wait until he dies, and then somebody will say, well, he really should be in the hit king. So
yeah. Out of humility for a fellow human being, yeah, I agree with you. The the time is right, especially with this COVID thing going around now.
right,
Things have changed. They're letting people out of prisons. They're letting this. They're letting that. I'm not saying it's right what he did, gambling on baseball, but he's been going through. He's been banned for over 30 years, and I agree with you. I'd love to see the chance for him to just know that, hey, I'm in the Hall of Fame. Um, it would mean the world to him, and you know what is it going to mean off of the backs of anybody out there that still has an axe to grind with Pete Rose? I mean, bury the axe, go on with your lives, let him be a Hall of Famer, and let's end this silliness.
exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the guys that hit it. Look, the Hall of Fame is supposed to be about what you do on the field. And there was none better. There were plenty of guys with more talent than Pete Rose, but none of them were better. He made everybody better. He made himself beat people with his hustle, with his just pure determination. And I don't care whether he was a rotten human being or what. He was magnificent. The other day, I was watching something on MLB. They had the Philly game, or I forget what it was, a playoff game or something, and to watch him play again and to take a walk and run down the first and steal second, and like you said, he's 40 years old. He's stealing second off these guys.
Head
Ah,
first slides, the
head
whole nine
first
yards.
slides, and the baseball instinct that he had.
He
That
loved it. He lived, ate, slept, and he lived baseball.
and I still believe, and I could be naive, I don't believe that he bet against his team.
Yeah, and it's a shame that he even did that. Like
It is a shame, but
betting in general in games is not a good idea. It's
right.
it's silly. Take it from me. I've done a little bit of gambling since New Jersey's got the online for free with the sports, and I caught myself saying, who cares who won that game? Why did I even bet that game? I'm not going to
Yeah,
do this anymore. And I just stopped. I was like,
yeah.
you know what? Like, who cares?
Go play the slot machine. It's a lot more fun.
Now, am I banned from baseball for life because I bet on a baseball game? So I
Well, I
guess
mean,
so.
look, they did it. They banned Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays that one year because they were getting paid $100,000 a year as greeters for a casino. But those guys, they didn't
Didn't
have
make
the
money.
same, huh?
They didn't make money like they do today.
Exactly. They didn't have the same opportunities that today players do. They weren't as educated as today's. A lot of these guys today go to college or are drafted out of college. Those guys were drafted as especially like a Willie Mays. he grew up in Alabama, I think it was, or Georgia. Where did Willie Mays grow? Well, anyway, he was dirt poor, and this was his way out of that. Mickey Mantle grew up in Oklahoma as a dirt poor. His father was a miner, and he did it to avoid that. Well, he was a great player, but I mean, but you know what I mean. Like you said, these guys weren't highly educated. Somebody's handing them a check for $100,000 to stand there every so often and shake hands or go to a thing, and yet they came down on top of them. They weren't betting. They were just representing a casino. And then the ironic thing nowadays is with Major League Baseball and the NBA owning shares in these betting things, these sports kings or whatever the heck they're called. And
Yeah.
I don't care how you slice it. We've discussed this a million times before. It's betting, and you can call it fantasy. You can call it whatever you want to. You're supporting and you're owning betting parlors almost.
And you're taking money from people that can least afford to
That's
lose it
right.
sometimes.
And so if you're going to do that, then let Pete Rose in. That's and I'll get off my soapbox now.
And I'll just end the podcast here by you brought up Willie Mays, and you put a light bulb off in my head as a kid. And I think I've told this on this podcast before, but we've done the show for many years, so we always have new listeners. So I can keep repeating my old stories. but, but I remember growing up outside of Atlantic City, and as you said, Willie Mays worked for Bally's Corporation, and he went around to different functions and parties and things like that, and mingled with the people. And he was at a benefit softball tournament one evening in my small town right outside of Atlantic City, and I actually sat next to him in the bleachers. A chance of a lifetime, something that'll never be done again, obviously, because I'm older now. But I looked over at Willie Mays and I just noticed his World Series rings on, and I was just in awe. I was like, wow, I'm sitting next to Willie Mays watching softball. It was amazing.
Did you talk to him at all?
A little bit, but I was so young that, what could you say as a young person? But I was, I
Did
was
you get his
very,
autograph or anything?
I don't know if I even asked him for his autograph during that. I don't believe so. But it was just nice to, mingle and sit next to him. And I knew he was, a luminary in the baseball world.
Yeah.
And I was just like in awe of, like, hey, like I'm sitting next to Willie
Wow,
Mays. Wow.
that's something else. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
What's the
So
oldest autograph? Are you an autograph guy, or were you
uh,
younger?
a little bit. My mom used to get her to get my autographs if she could. She worked at the first casino in Atlantic City at one point, and they used to get a lot of the baseball stars in there, and she got me quite a few autographs from players like that. But I was never an autograph hound. It's a lot of work
It is a lot of work.
if you want to go out and get them yourself.
Yeah.
It's hard work. It's not easy. But back then, I didn't have a pen. I was a kid. I didn't think of, Willie Mays, and nobody else was really bothering me anyway. But
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, it was pretty cool. Remember myself looking over at his rings and all. And I was like, man, this is pretty cool. He had a suit jacket on and all. But if it weren't for things like that, you wouldn't see some of these players. You wouldn't get around them. And even Pete Rose, for example, I met him locally in the South Jersey area. He opened the Kmart one time. He was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
honored guest. So, yeah, he was in the sporting goods section. So you go back there, and he had run out of color autograph 8x10s he was giving out,
Right.
and I did get a mimeograph copy of his autograph,
Yeah.
a real copy, but.
Yeah.
And I talked to him. I said, "Man, you were the best, Pete." Like so.
It's to a certain extent, you miss some of that nowadays. I don't know if there is the connection. Everything is so they're ushered in, they're ushered out. When you read like I said, The Boys of Summer is a great book, and you read about how these guys used to walk through the streets of Brooklyn to go, from Ebbets Field to their houses. They lived right in the community, and then we go, hey, how you doing? That could never go on nowadays. I don't think. Um, Maybe in their community, where they live, but everybody lives all scattered now. It's just a different time. And then you do meet some of these guys, and some of them are nice, some of them are not. I mean, I met Ron Darling at a book signing, and couldn't have been nicer. I had interviewed him, and I reminded him that I had interviewed him like a couple of weeks before, and we had talked about my mother had a picture taken with Babe Ruth. Everybody knows that story. And I brought the pictures with me because he was very interested when I was interviewing him.
Mm-hmm.
And he got so interested in the pictures when I was there that they had to come over and they had to say, we got other people online, because he was taking so much. Him and I were talking so much that it was like crazy. Other people were waiting behind us, and he was like, "Oh, look at these pictures. Yeah, these pictures are great." Yeah. So when he's asking me when did it take place, and we were having a regular conversation, but very nice guy.
You guys will
And then
have to
I've
go to
heard,
lunch sometime, maybe.
yeah. Then I've heard stories about other guys like Keith Hernandez, great announcer, but not the nicest guy in the world. Mariano Rivera, not the nicest guy in the world. In fact, he did a book signing, and I'm not sure. I'd have to ask my friend Jeff of Baseball and Barbecue. I forget the story completely, but I don't know if he never showed up for the book signing, or he had signed earlier the books, or he was there, but he wasn't signing the books. The books were already signed. He just handed you the book or something or other. But um, sometimes you have to go a little bit out of the way for the fan. I mean, we still pay the salary. We still are, and who knows? Maybe this COVID virus thing will have an impact on them, in that if they're playing in front of empty stadiums, they'll realize how much important the fan is to the game. And maybe that'll help bridge the gap more between the fans and the players.
Yeah, and I think the players know that to a certain extent, but bringing you back to the MLB, the show with the players playing, yeah, you can see some of that in the chat rooms that are going on at twitch.tv if you want to check it out. It's usually around anywhere from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is when they're starting these games. But in the chat rooms, you'll see all the, and I want to call it stupid questions that people ask, like, hey, what's your favorite dinner? This, that, or the other. Like, I mean, I can imagine that gets old after a while. And being a player or anybody in a public figure type of job, I could see somebody getting a little like dull-edged around people, like, don't ask me such silly questions, but yet, that's what people do. So I see both sides of what could be the story with that as being not cold, but after a while, I guess you get tired of it.
I guess so, and I can remember listening to a successful podcast, and I'm not going to mention it with. I don't even remember the name of it at this point in time, but that was the kind of questions that they asked. What was your favorite movie? What's your favorite color? And I'm thinking, do they really want to answer that? And yet, some of them seem like, yeah, they enjoyed talking about that stuff,
Right,
because
because
I
they
guess it
know,
was, the hosts were around their age and everything, and I'm thinking, but
and it's
I
promoting
don't know.
them to an audience, so to speak, in a certain way with an interview like that, as opposed to, Joe in the corner saying, hey, what's your favorite color? Like, what's it to you, But, it's more self promotion at that point, I think, on a a syndicated show, and I've seen them as well. Like silly questions and
Yeah.
all. But I think they understand that's more so like
They're
putting the
just
player
promoting their brand and all of that kind of
exactly
stuff. Yeah.
all the
It could be. It could
pushing
be.
their egos up a little bit, and yeah. But anyway, we made the best of this podcast.
Well, certainly we had a lot to. It is amazing how there's still a lot of stuff we can talk about. I don't know as we go on whether or not. Well, we'll just chat then, and
I think it'll be fine. We always seem to put together a nice content. And by the way, before I forget to mention, please give us an email, Gary at baseballtalkradio.com or Rich at baseballtalkradio.com. We used to hear from a lot of people out there. We know there's still a lot of people out there listening. So drop us a line one day if you want. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, and please listen and subscribe because to be honest, listenership's down a little bit, and I noticed I've spoken to people on other podcasts, and that they're getting the same thing and different theories. Some people think that a lot of people listen. A lot of people listen during their commute, and being that we're not commuting anywhere, that's hurting, and we understand that. But don't forget to tell your friends and family about us so we can keep doing this. We want to keep doing this. We want to keep talking baseball during this time and beyond. And so, but we don't want to. Well, we do enjoy talking to one another. But we like to have other people in on the conversation as well.
That's true. I thank you all for joining us for this podcast, the Baseball Talk Radio Show. You can find us over at anchor.fm/Baseball Talk Radio Show. We're on all the major podcast aggregators there, Google Podcasts, Spotify. So please check it out. Hit the subscribe button, as Gary said. You can subscribe to the show and become part of it with small monthly donation if you'd like over at our Anchor site. Send us an email. It's been nice, the show, Gary, and I can't wait to the next one.
Me neither, Rich, and I'll see you next time.